G'day everyone, how's it going? Coming at you from the studio today, and in this video I'm going to show you how to color grade Canon Log 3 footage in Premiere Pro. So it's been a little while since I put out a video. I've taken a bit of a break from the YouTube uploads and the algorithm isn't very happy with me, and if you're not happy with seeing me more often, then I'm sorry, but just had to take some time out with family and stuff, coming back out of lockdown with a lot of social stuff happening and that kind of thing, which has been awesome. But now I'm back into the YouTube game and I'm looking forward to getting some great content out to you before the end of the year. So this over on the screen here is what I want to show you. It's literally 2 clips shot on the Canon R6 in CLOG 3. This was a real estate shoot that we had, and this was shot by a contractor, Danny Camera. So I've done the one previously in DaVinci Resolve. Now I'm going to show you how I go about this footage and processing the Canon Log 3 in Premiere Pro. So let's have a look at this. Just a couple of clips here. And I'm not sure how my computer's going with doing the screen capture and scrubbing this 4K footage. It's the H.265 footage, so I'm not sure how it's going to play back. But anyway, let's jump right into it. So using the Lumetri color panel here, and I'm going to jump into the color panel within Premiere Pro here. So this clip here, basically the way I would work with this clip is I would just firstly bring up my waveforms or my scopes, which is over here. Now it's on the same screen as my actual footage. So I'm gonna move it to, I think I can move it to here. Let me try that. We'll move it to here, underneath this. There we go. This has got some overexposed sections here and some kind of good mid exposure around 40-50 IRE. So it's fairly good, but all I want to do is start working on this in Lumetri Color. Now, Lumetri Color has got an input LUT for Canon Log. I've got a couple of Canon Log 1 LUTs here, so I haven't got the Canon Log 3 LUT or anything like that. So you could add one of these LUTs as a starting point for this. But what I'll do, I'll just show you from first principles what I'm trying to achieve here. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm wanting to pull down the shadows and pull up the highlights and just get this more in range of where I think it needs to be. So coming down, it looks like the shadows are cutting off around 10, and highlights, can push them higher as well. So probably up the exposure of this as well to get the exposure more in a pleasing kind of range for this particular room. I don't want the room to look dark at all. I want it to look like it's a little bit overexposed maybe. That's kind of what I would do just to get this in range of exposure. So there's still not a lot of color information in this. So now I'm just going to take my saturation and I'm going to pull in saturation. Now what that's going to do is it's going to show me if there's color shifts and stuff, because as I bring in saturation, it's going to show me the areas that are a little yellow and stuff. So looking at a little yellow. So then I'll take my white balance here and I'm going to allow the white balance to, just going to tweak the white balance a little bit. I don't want it to be too green, definitely not green. You don't want nice white walls to be green, and also not too magenta. So somewhere between green and magenta. I want this to sit, and I want it to have maybe like more blue than yellow, because yellow is kind of like a little bit too much on walls. Blue certainly looks a lot better. So that's pretty good. I can probably add more exposure now, more saturation now that I've tweaked this color a little bit. So again, a little bit less blue, a little bit more magenta, somewhere there, but I still feel like it's lacking a little bit of contrast. So let me jump into curves, and I'm basically going to apply a curves adjustment, and I want to kind of boost up the midtones and just pull a little bit of shadows into that. Yeah, and then saturation. I actually want to boost boost the saturation again. And in this kind of bluey tone area here, to bring out some of the blues in these pictures and in this table. So you can see that's just kind of bringing out just a little bit more pop in these tables here. This is kind of a weird color for the flooring here. It looks very yellowy. It's probably not that yellowy, but it's got a little bit more stuff happening in there. So what I'm going to do there is just remove some of that. And probably not too much, just remove a little bit. So just pull a little bit out, a little bit more maybe more into the yellow there. So sort of getting this more in range, and I'm actually going to remove that. And I'm going to go to saturation versus saturation here. Just bring in more saturation. But I don't like this green coming into the clip here, so I'm going to try and remove that. So hue versus saturation. I'll just delete. So I'm going to try and remove the color. It's kind of this yellow to green. So I'm going to put a line at green, put a line at yellow, and just bring that color down. To get rid of that color. And also remove a lot of the green as well, and then just boost the blues up. So something like that is pretty good for this shot. There's a little bit of things I would clean up having a longer time. There's a little bit of like a luma edge in this, and maybe this here I could mask and mask that out a little bit so it's not as overexposed in the window. But essentially for the purposes of this, that's kind of got me in the ballpark where I want to be. So let's have a look at this other shot. Here, we'll go back to editing, jump onto this second shot here, and we'll hop into the color window again. So I'm going to sort of look at the exposure and just getting this scope in range where I want it to be. So let me go bring the exposure up. This one needs to be brought up a lot. I'm going to try and come to where their skin tone is sort of clipping this area here. Now I could mask out where their skin tone sits in this. Don't know exactly where it is, but I'm happy just to start tweaking here. So I'm going to push this up just before it starts to get haze, like that haze on this edge of the shot here. In this area it's quite hazy, so I'm going to come down with exposure just to mitigate that. And then I'm going to boost the shadows, bring up the shadows just a little bit, and probably crush down the blacks a little bit just to bring a lot more contrast into the shot. I'm not going to go all the way down with the blacks. I want this to sort of sit where it needs to be, so the actual black is going to be right down the bottom, but nothing else is going to be down the bottom. I don't want these shadows to look dull or anything like that. So that's kind of my initial correction for this one. And then I'm going to obviously grab this saturation slider and work it all the way up. And I'm really looking at skin here, skin tones, because that's sort of what I want to focus on in this particular shot, is the skin tones here. So I don't want these to go too orangey or the wrong sort of color as I push contrast. So getting too orangey there. So I'm going to push it up until I sort of see it naturally popping. And then I'm going to go back to the full shot and just look at the color rendition of the shot. So probably pull more saturation and then work on the white balance here just to tweak a little bit. Now this is interesting because it was shot in CLOG, but it was shot throughout a whole day. So there was inside shots and outside shots, and it was a quick turnaround run and gun. So my shooter wasn't really worrying too much about his white balance for the day. So that's sort of pretty in range where I want it to be, but it's still got a lot of white and stuff in the shot. So I'm going to then tweak things like highlights to get rid of some of that white. There's a bit too much white pop in it, and shadows boost up a little more. And then again, I'm going to come into curves and build a bit now of a curve adjustment for this. So I'm really going to boost these highlights, and I'm kind of crushing these highlights down, you know, and sort of separating them from the shadows. I'm getting some green hues and some weird things in the shadows, but all in all, it looks fairly good. The couple look great in this clip. So I'll just go again and tweak a little bit more of that too. Just probably pull up just the highlights a little more. And I will actually increase shadows a bit. So somewhere there is a good starting point for me. All the information's there. I've just got to kind of make it really pop and make it work. So back to curves again. And again, I can probably push a little bit more in the highlights. And again, I don't want to lose the detail there. So that's pretty good. And then what I want to do is a few colors. I want to just sort of tweak. I can go again to saturation, and I can just lift. Lift saturation. You can see that's bringing in a lot of green into shadows in the back. So I don't want to do too much with that, but that's giving you a fairly good idea. So if I was to, let's say, boost it up more, let's say I want their skin to pop more. Then in this background here, there's sort of this green hue. So then I would come up and I could go hue versus saturation. Again, yellow to sort of green. And just remove a lot of that. You see that green's coming out of the back there. That's sort of what I do with that. I'm pulling out that green so it's not as prominent in the back shadows here. Also this shot, probably I would fix this axis a little bit, rotate this shot a little bit. Might just go to effects controls and just rotate. Just a little bit and just zoom it in a little bit. Scale it up a little bit, and so that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. It's obviously pushing a lot here in the top, so I might actually just take the exposure down a little bit as well, even though I don't really want it to sit in the darks there. I can just kind of bring it down a little bit, just so it's not as heavily crushed in the exposure in the, you know, highlights. But that's sort of what I feel is pretty good for that shot. and it's taking it from no color. I've got to turn off curves as well. Don't know, curves. So that's the basic correction, what that's done, and then this is the curves and saturation adjustment. So there you go, that's 2 clips working with them in Premiere Pro in Lumetri color without any LUTs or anything like that. And maybe for the sake of this, we should have a look at what a LUT could do. Let's do that. I'll just duplicate this footage and I'll turn off the, I'll just remove the correction, and then I'm going to add so yeah, what I've done is I've taken one of my old Canon Log 1 LUTs just to give you an idea of how quick it might be to throw a LUT on there. So as you can see, this is the footage before the LUT is gone on, and just picking up my base LUT from my LUT packs online, which gives you kind of, if I take out this and remove the saturation as well, it gives you like this kind of look, like a base Rec 709 look. And if you take the Lumetri scope, let me just try and pull that up quickly. So yeah, if you come back to my Lumetri color here, if I go none, then you can see the scope is like that. But if I go to that Canon log, it just brings in a little bit of that exposure and just opens it up to more of a Rec 709. And so from there, it's already kind of done this correction and brought the exposure up to where I want it to be. So then it's just a matter of adding saturation and just tweaking the colors a little bit to just fix skin tones and stuff. There's still like a hue across this footage, so it'd be worthwhile bringing in more contrast into this, and then maybe crushing out the blacks a little bit just to give it a little bit more contrast. But you can see that very quickly we're locking into a color grade that is, you know, quite decent. It's almost there. So that's the beauty of using like a LUT and then just tweaking, you know, a little bit after that, once you sort of bring that from the log profile into a Rec 709 profile with a LUT. And you can purchase my LUTs on my website, michaeldrowley.com. I'll leave a link below to those, but they can just help you to pull a grade much, much quicker. And yeah, hopefully if you're battling to get a good grade out of your log footage, well then that's a way that you can go about doing that. So hopefully this has helped you, and yeah, it shows you that it's not very difficult. It's really worthwhile shooting in Canon log because you get that extra dynamic range and you got a lot more to play with. And you can see here, even though it's baked in color profile and stuff, it's not a raw footage or raw image. It bakes in the white balance as well. But even if your white balance is out, like in the case of these clips, you can correct and get that back to where you want it to be. So hopefully you've got something out of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.